right.
JB.
DLP.
J Matt.
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Hanging, man.
Life good?
Hanging. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You look good. Thanks
feel
for dressing
good.
up for us. This is nice.
Well, you know,
I like it.
it's how I dress.
I got the pen, though. You got the pen rolling.
Daily.
I love it.
Since kindergarten, brother.
Since how long?
Kindergarten. I've always worn a pin in my shirt since kindergarten.
Were you signing
Kindergarten
checks?
photos, first grade, second grade, all through 6, junior high, high school. There was always a pin in my shirt.
Nice.
It was a Bic.
Nice.
But a pin nevertheless.
So the Mont Blanc is like, this is coming up right here.
A pin nevertheless.
Yeah, all right. What were you doing in kindergarten with the pen? Were you signing, like, were you?
I got it from my dad. My dad always wore pins in his shirt.
No
so,
kidding.
Yeah, my dad. My dad was that kind of geeky guy that had the 4 pins here.
Yeah.
And if he didn't have a shirt with a pocket, he just kind of tucked it in.
Yeah.
Or if he wore a T-shirt, he dropped
No
it
kidding.
in. Always.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Got it from my dad.
That's also good for you now because you can just, like, when people are asking for your autograph, you can just whip
Jesus.
that out and just,
And signed Jonah Beer.
Yeah, you better. You better. Every once in a while, I mean, give me something. Holy shit. I mean, seriously.
Jonah and I have been to many countries together, many provinces, many cities, many wineries, many places, and shared many a great meal.
That's true.
And he's been a dear friend of mine for a very long time. I learned a lot from him. I look to him for advice on a lot of things, especially in the wine industry here in Napa Valley. And this is my family, so I'm very excited to be here drinking with my guy, my family. And I have a feeling that you and I are probably going to be indulging in the fruit of John Williams.
You got it.
The fruit of John Williams. But a little birdie told me that maybe you brought 2 different vintages for us to kind of decipher from Frog's Leap.
And I honestly don't think that there's any reason for us just to open one. Like, I'm in the mood we can pop them both and give them a whirl. But I did want to give you the option because I was thinking about, we've had a lot of conversation over the years over a lot of bottles of wine, just about Napa in general and about the past and the history. We're both students of the history of this valley. And so I thought, let me bring a couple things that mark a couple of interesting moments. First one is 1996 Zinfandel. And 96 Zin, because this was still when John was doing, and still is doing, that kind of very claret style Zinfandel, right? And it's from a cool vintage. It's like 13.4% alcohol. It's got tons of acid. And
I love cool vintages.
I know, right? And it's always seemingly the vintages that the critics pan are the ones that actually end up being, 96, 98, all that sort of thing. So 96 Zin is option 1. And then a banner year for Frog's Leap, 2003 Rutherford Cabernet.
Oh, wow.
That was the year a young whippersnapper named Jonah Beer came on as general manager and changed the course. No, all right. But it was actually one of the
Did you reshape the aspirations of John Williams?
No. Let's try to put it into a format that the customer could understand and buy. But this was one of those Rutherfords when we were doing 2 Cabernets. We had one Rutherford AVA and one we just called Rutherford, and then the Napa Cab. But this was the 03, was 100% Cab. It's very much Rutherford bench. And it's kind of in that point now where it's got age to it, but not, it's not so long in the tooth that it's just showing tertiary. So, your choices.
I'm a fan of opening both.
Okay.
But age before beauty. I definitely want to crack into this 1996 cool vintage Zin.
Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
And primarily simply because, just being a historian, you being a historian of Frog's Leap because you've been there so long, but me asking you questions about Frog's Leap, having come to Frog's Leap since, for the last decade because of you. Of you. I know you guys have gone through a few different eras, if you will, of Zinfandel making, Cabernet making especially. But this era of Zinfandel was still in the claret style, as you mentioned. And then maybe you had a couple years where you were experimenting with other styles, but this is still claret style.
Yeah, I always tease John, he's a big fan of the San Francisco Giants. And at the time that Barry Bonds was cranking out dingers and you had all the home runs, the steroids era, the Frog's Leap Zin kind of did drift a little bit in that time to kind of, we had a string of over 14 and a half and a little more extraction weight. And I think it was just kind of getting caught up in the time, right? Because since 1981, John made a little bit of Zinfandel from the grapes at Spotswood. Because Mary Novak drives such a hard bargain, John wanted to buy some Sauvignon Blanc grapes, but he had to buy some Zinfandel, or he wouldn't get the Sauvignon Blanc grapes. So he was kind of strong-armed into starting with Zinfandel, and not really, I don't think enthusiastically at first, but then he kind of got bit by it, right? The first couple of vintages were 100% Zin, and then it was Louis Martini who was like, you should be doing some co-ferment with some Petit Syrah. So that started to happen by like 85, 86, and by 87, that was like the rule of law at Frog Leap, and still is, to like co-ferment almost the maximum amount of Petit Syrah. So this was kind of in that time when there was Petit Syrah and a little bit of Carignan co-fermented in there. It's all from St. Helena. It's actually kind of like this is to me what we're back to today.
Love that.
Like we we drifted maybe a little bit.
Vintages though.
Yeah, just
a handful of vintages. Handful of vintages.
And I think by Napa standards, no one would fucking notice. You know, I mean, 14 and a half. This is when Zap was going on in San Francisco, and like, I don't know if you ever went to that thing, but man,
I've never been to Zap once, man. No diss. No, I've never been to Zap.
You walk in and it's like people walking out. It's like purple teeth, purple mouths. I mean, wine's at 18% alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, back in the early 2000s, that's what it was like. And so,
like, bro, you been eating blueberries all day?
yeah. That cloud makeup you rocking there.
Thank you very much,
So,
man.
96.
Are you pouring me claret right now?
I know, right?
What is
Doesn't
this?
it look
This
like
is
it?
claret, man.
Doesn't it look like it? Tell you what, it's a cool vintage Zinfandel.
Why are cool vintages panned so much, man? Like, and you know I love them. Everywhere you and I go, I always pick a cool vintage. I always pick a cool vintage. Why are they panned so much?
I think that I guess it's because the warm vintages are just so showy right out of the gate, right? You know, they're the child stars, right? They're the kind of like flashy, easy to love, easy to understand. And cool vintages are a bit more reticent, they're a bit more quiet, and they're more the novel than the movie. And I think that's what you and I both like about them, because they're a little more cerebral, they're a little more fun, but you have to give them a little bit of time.
So, Zinfandel, you know, I could make the old children's kind of song. One of these things is not like the other. You know, when you think about the great and historic Zinfandels in the valley, I don't need to name them. They're there.
Sure.
Great historic Zinfandels. Why are you guys such in a positive way, not that what they do is negative, but why are you guys such the antithesis or the contrarian of every other Zinfandel producer? It's got to start. It's got to start right here in the dirt, man. Yeah,
it definitely does. But I think that's the right word. Contrarian is, and it's a lot like you, though. I mean, you're kind of a contrarian kind of guy, right? If the world zigs, fucking DLynn's got a zag. Like, you know, there's no.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you were the most dapper son of a bitch out there, right? You know, like, you know, I got the big knot in the tie, and I got the pointy shoes, and just about the time that like I could finally afford like a bespoke sport coat, all of a sudden you're into it's just Yeezys and tees from here on out. I mean, what the hell?
And hair and a beard,
oh my
right?
God, I tell you. I don't know what they were putting in that Penfolds, but as soon as that shit ended, it was Yeezys and tees. And that contrarian.
Hey, we do things differently at the Tesca.
Yeah, oh, jeez, right.
At the Tesca, man. We do things differently at the Tesca.
You definitely do things differently at the Tesca. But there was that, you know, that contrarian, that kind of counterculture, that kind of like, I'll challenge that ethos. It's really kind of what roots John Williams, I think, since he started Frog Leap and since he kind of built it, was that, I mean, there was people back in, you know, 1985, 1986, you know, when he was converting things to organic and they didn't really know what they were doing, that were saying, well, you can't farm that way. You can't do it without this. Or, you know, if you draw too much attention to the problems of these herbicides and pesticides, then we're gonna, you know, other vintners are gonna get pissed. But he kind of like, you know, if it's about pursuing fine wine, like if the end goal is the pursuit of terroir-based fine wine,
True.
He'll zig when everyone else zags.
Yeah.
Almost reflexively, right? And I think you can see what led to maybe some of the vintner tension between him and Larry Turley, you know, whose Zinfandel stance is almost like a pretty good yin to this yang.
It is,
right?
it is. And Larry's a legend with Zinfandel.
Of course, of course. And, you know, they started Frog Leap together in 1981. Larry was ER doctor over in Santa Rosa. So there was that kind of like, you know, John was running the show at Frog Leap forever, and then when Larry retired out of medicine and wanted to start making wines too, like they just had a different idea about wine.
And that's cool.
And
that's
great.
Cool. Yeah.
That's great. But this
you and I have a different idea about Barolo, and it's cool.
Yeah. Well, I prefer good Barolo. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You love that Barrique. Can't get enough. I know. I'm just teasing you.
So I love Barrique and Ovats, man. I love them both.
I know you do. You're a sweet guy like that. But I think that what you can see the benefit of that claret style and this kind of more reserved is that. I'm not good at the math here, but what are we at here? Like 24 years?
Yeah.
I mean, this is.
No. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, jeez.
This is like one of those things where you can see that most people don't think Zinfandel is going to age at all. Full stop, right?
Yeah.
And And if it tastes like blueberry pie and yogurt, I can kind of get why you would think that. But then here what we see is that this is a style of wine that has life to it, and I think still has time yet to go.
Yeah, man, I think so. The beautiful thing about this wine, though, is it's Zinfandel because you know it's Zinfandel, but it's showing such this oxidative, not in a bad way.
Oh, for sure.
It's showing this wonderful oxidative, almost claret style of cigar box and graphite and like whetstone and not baking spice, much more savory spice, but because you know it's Zinfandel, you have to say, okay, there's baking spice there. Yeah.
It's funny, that was at a vintners meeting, this would have been about like mid 80s, so like 85, 86. Louis Martini was on like one of those panels, and a journalist asked him if his Zinfandels could age. And he said, well, don't let them get too old, because after a while, they taste like them damn Bordeaux wines. So, you know, to an Italian immigrant living in Napa, there was nothing worse than your proud Italian wine from America. It tastes fucking Bordeaux-esque.
Yeah.
And you can see that, like, after this kind of 15 to 20-year mark, the Zinfandels drift way into this, you know, very much kind of like, not Bordelaise in that kind of sense, but, they hit that claret, that kind of claret mark a little more.
Yeah.
And I like the acidity, but like you can see through it. Like the color's not too terribly purple and dark, and it's just like a
dude.
You can say elegant about Zin. You know, this is kind of
this is bright ruby fading into garnet, man. Like you wouldn't look at this wine on the site. You wouldn't look at this wine on site and say, I'm about to get into a Zinfandel.
Yeah, right.
You're thinking definitely, okay, I'm looking at this wine. It's got some age. It's got sediment. Probably claret style. Is it Cabernet? Is it Merlot? Is it left or right?
Yeah.
This is just sight. Then you kind of dive into everything else, but you're not thinking Zinfandel when you look at this, man.
It's definitely not. But I think that's what I love about it, too. And then cool, so it's like a little more of that kind of tautness to it.
So look, back to the Earth, man.
Yo.
I'm wearing my Yeezy Earth 350s today. So with the Earth.
Of course you are.
With the Earth.
Shout out to Adidas.
Shout out to Adidas, our boy Zion.
Thank you, Zion.
Yeah, Zion Armstrong. So, you know, thinking about the Earth, you guys' approach to the Earth is not much different from everyone else, but you guys definitely sit in your own kind of hamlet when you're talking about your approach to Earth and Mother Nature and farming.
Yeah.
So why dry farming?
That's a big one, man. Obviously, dry farming is something you've got to kind of commit to from the get-go. You have to choose a rootstock that's going to work with it, right? So you've got to be thinking Rupestris rootstocks instead of Riparia. So you've got to be thinking like great rootstocks like St. George, right? You know, and we still have some AXR1 Merlot and Zin, some of it over at Julie's place, that's dry farmed and never died to phylloxera because the rhizosphere set's too low.
Wasn't AXR1 a bad word for a little bit?
It was a terrible word for a little bit, but you know, you could also blame the introduction of irrigation, like the heavier use of irrigation that started in like around 1980, right? So, you know, if you think about dry farming, a lot of people think immediately it just means not irrigating, right? But it's much more active than that. It's much more involved. And the goal isn't to... One of the wonderful bystander goals is that you save a shit ton of water. Like, and I think in California, we all know that's important. But it's about connecting a grapevine to its soil in a way that is going to help it to reflect with more clarity its origin, its terroir, right? Yeah. And it's not to say that if you irrigate a vine, it can't show terroir. It's not black and white like that. But it's like you know, for the millennials out there, it's like no filter, right? If you're gonna post something with no filter, that's what dry farming helps you to do. It's gonna help you more with a little more etched clarity, kind of draw attention to that. And that was something that was obviously the norm here in Napa Valley from, you know, if we consider George Yount's first wine probably around 1840, right? So up until 1976 1971 is when Andy Beckstoffer first even saw drip irrigation. It wasn't until 76 it was installed. And it wasn't until the 80s when people were starting to irrigate more kind of prolifically. So wines like the wines that were in the Paris tasting were dry farmed, right? You know,
they were.
Wines.
I think all of them were.
All of them were. Yeah. All of them were.
Every single producer that was chosen for the Paris tasting by Spurrier was dry farmed.
Right. So when someone says like, okay, well, you know, you can't dry farm in today's Napa Valley, it's just bullshit. And the truth is, you're going to get grapevines with better connection to soil, yeah, but you're also going to get better connection to their environment. And what's going to happen out of that is you're going to get vines that operate within a kind of a growth pattern that gives them better flavor at lower sugar and higher acid, which is why you also tend to see great dry farm wines and great wines from places like Di Costanzo, right, or Enfield or Mathiasen that are really highlighting this kind of ability to produce high acid with ripe, mature flavors at more modest alcohol. And I think that's a byproduct of dry farming as well.
I remember you and I, we were in Bordeaux. We might have been in Bordeaux, but we had a conversation about whether or not you can actually blind taste, whether or not when you taste the wine, you know that this wine has been dry farmed.
Oh, yeah. We did have that conversation, and I think that I was probably a couple bottles of Costa Esternel deep and probably made some comment like I could, but I certainly can't. So don't start doing that shit on camera. But you know, I can tell already this cork's gonna be a bit of a bitch coming out.
Dude, you got the Asso, bro.
I know. Should I back it out and try the Asso? Or should I do Poor Man's Durand?
Poor Man's Durand.
Poor Man's Durand.
Do it.
All right. Let's go Poor Man's Durand. So, you know, I think that you can tell if a wine's been dry farmed sometimes from just the idea of like what the wine is showing, right? If it's showing that it's got kind of a persistence and a precision to it, then, you know, there's a chance that that's Poor Man's Durand comes through.
Money.
You know, there's a chance.
And it was splitting right there.
It was, yeah. You could feel it getting a little soft. So I think that there's a chance that you can kind of guess, you know, but like there's so many ways that winemakers now can fix a wine in the cellar, but they tend to, you know, and you and I have had this discussion before. You can almost smell, you can almost feel and taste a wine that's been acidulated versus a wine with natural acid, right?
Of course.
And that to me is one thing I always look for, is that high acid, high toned element that you typically get out of a non-irrigated dry farmed.
Well, I think you and I are going to say cheers to the 1996 Frog's Leap Zinfandel, one of the true OGs. Not to diss some of the other OGs that are out there, but you know my love for John, man. You know my love for you, and this is such a pretty wine, man. I think we're going to move to a little bit of Cabernet.
Let's do it.
Cheers.
Salud.
So, look, I know you and John and the folks at Frog's Leap, man, you guys are amazingly proud about your Cabernet.
Yeah.
And from your start in 1981, well, let's backtrack.
Yeah.
1981, the foundation of Frog's Leap.
Yeah.
But that's not John's first foray into Cabernet. And the reason I say that, something he might have been doing special with the 73 bottle of Cabernet that maybe you'll highlight on.
Yeah. John, first job, Larry Turley got him introduced to Warren Winiarski over at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, and John became one of the first employees and first winemaker at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars in 1975. And his first week on the job, they were bottling the 73 SLV that goes on to win the Paris tasting.
Jeez.
Now, at the time, I think Warren tried to pay him in bottles. And he's like, screw it, I'll take the cash. He was making 87 cents an hour or whatever. Winiarski was not known for being uber generous with the coin, if you know what I mean. So, and I speak of experience. So you had then John do this, but then next year in 76, you know, they win this Paris tasting, and John's kind of like, man, I'm telling you, man, this winemaking's easy. We're dominating the world. Back when he was in upstate New York, though, John did make, I think it was a Catawba from
Probably Catawba.
at like Glenora or Bully Hill or something, that he sent to the New York State Fair, and it got silver medal. First wine he ever made got silver medal. Oh, he was so fucking proud of himself. And then he found out that the gold medal went to a sparkling blueberry wine, and he was like, that's it, I'm out, everybody. Good night. So that's one of the reasons he left upstate New York and came out to Napa. That and what was everything that was going on out here with Mondavi and, you know, post-66 kind of stuff.
Of course.
So Cab kind of came into the being, kind of came into the, to John's kind of psyche with obviously this time at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, then up to Spring Mountain, where they made some beautiful cabinets.
Right across from me at Fantastic.
Right across, right, exactly. Yeah. We were working for Mike Robbins. And then kind of like, he zeroed in on Rutherford Bench. Like John worked with Andre Chelichev when he was at Stag's. Andre was all about Rutherford Bench. And so when John and his then wife Julie bought their first vineyard, it was on the Rutherford Bench proper.
Wow.
And so we started making kind of real deal Rutherford Bench cab in the 80s, in the mid 80s. And then it really, though, kind of took a big step forward with us in 1997 when John started working with the now estate vineyard of ours called the Rossi Vineyard, which is classic Rutherford Bench, sits on the Bear Creek alluvial fan, and it's just like old school. But it's 52 acres of intact vines.
I've heard John jokingly say before that you can't see the Rutherford Bench.
Yeah. It's true. We take people out and go, did you see the Rutherford Bench? Isn't it great? And it's just flat. You know, everyone's like, what the hell are you guys smoking?
It's under.
It's under, man. And that's what people don't get, is that like the vines see it from the rooting elements, right? So from their perspective, the Rutherford Bench is real and intact because if you're standing on like Highway 29 at like Whitehall Lane, right, and that's kind of right where
And
our
you're looking
Rossi's
north.
is, and and spin and look to the west, like
Oh,
you're
yeah,
looking
to-
at the
at the Miamis
you're
Range.
looking at the Miamis. Where you're standing, there's some deeper soils before you hit that kind of broken bedrock of the bench. But as you go to the west, it just thins, it thins, it thins. So Cabernet that's grown on that. The old timers would say it's like having a mountain vineyard, but having it on flat ground.
Wow.
So you had the benefits of a mountain vineyard, but you didn't have all the challenges of a mountain vineyard, which of course it gives you something totally different there. So this is kind of this '03 Rutherford was all from that vineyard. This is Rutherford Bench. This is kind of that classic kind of style, that kind of classic approach. And then this is also a bit mavericky, you know, a bit John Williams because there's no new oak at all.
Yeah.
This is only neutral,
Yeah.
no new oak in the Rutherford. It was all about kind of promoting that sense of terroir and that variety. And guys like Michael Slotchi, I think, really, for me, solidified this in my mind, this idea that what you smell often from a wine is really reflective of its vintage, but what it feels like, its mouthfeel, its texture, that's so much the terroir. And that's what I see in this wine. You know, it's that kind of crushed velvet-like texture
Shout to
that you
Mike.
can get out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So why the 2003? Look, I've seen your cellar. I've been in your personal cellar. I've seen Frog's Leap cellar. You've blessed a lot of amazing people, a lot of amazing wine folks, sommeliers, interns. I mean, you've blessed a lot of folks with opening great wines. Someone could come to your winery for the first time and you know that they're from a restaurant in Indianapolis or a restaurant in
Right.
Minnesota, restaurant in Dallas, and you find out what their birth year is and you open that bottle.
Yeah.
Why the '03?
The '03 was a bit of a selfish choice for me, to be honest. It was something that it was my first vintage I was a part of at Frog's Leap, you know. And 17 years working with John has been a real honor and a real blessing. And I love the people I get to work with on a daily basis. And I think that for me, it was reminiscent of kind of that first year when things were, you know, Frog's Leap isn't the hero of every damn story. Like, you know, we've had our down years, and when I got there was some struggles, right? Economically, and the sales of the wines, the way they were understood by the public and the trade. But I remember sitting in, and we had two fucking double wide trailers, right? We were one trailer short of a park. Like we were ready, if a tornado hit Napa, it was coming for Frog's Leap because we had more trailers on that damn property. So, you know, I think about that and like where we were at and what we were doing and then where we've come, like what's happened since then, right? And that people are starting to wake up a little bit to what John's been doing for 4 decades. And we're not done, man. You know, we have a lot we still need to learn, and that's why I'm so proud of what John's son is doing. He's now challenging his dad in the way his dad used to challenge other vintners. Like,
love that.
we need to get better, we need to do more. A part of dry farming is typically tilling the vineyard, right? So breaking up the topsoil.
That's a conversation.
So now it's like,
yeah.
hey, we're learning from people like Mimi Castile that like we need to be thinking about regenerative farming in a new way, a no-till dry farm approach, which, you know, John finds himself kind of all of a sudden going, nah, I don't think that'll work. And I'm like, that's exactly what someone would have told you, and you would be pissed off.
Yeah.
So now his son's out there crimping and doing all these different things to try to help the no-till approach to our vineyards. And so to me, this was like, I wanted to choose '03 because 100% cab, which we don't really make a lot of at Frog's Leap. We almost always have a little something in there. So I like that. It was a personal choice. And it was kind of like that time frame, like that generation, that 15-year period when we've changed a lot about how Frog's Leap is known and seen and perceived, the understanding of what we're doing. But it also then says like, man, we got something else coming next. Like that next chapter is probably going to be even better.
So what's the next chapter? This vineyard is your monopole now.
Yeah, that's it.
It's yours.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything you guys do, you were really pioneers with organic winemaking.
Yep.
You're one of the first. You may not be the first, but one of the first to be LEED certified.
Yep.
You're biodynamic. You're dry farmed. What's the future of Frog's Leap? What's the future of Rutherford and the Rutherford Bench? Of course, the AVA, obviously. And do you think that John will anyway maybe shape a new wave of Rorys in the Napa Valley in the way they do things?
Yeah, it's funny. We had some young winemakers over that are, you know, like a part of like Bedrock and the guys at Enfield and stuff. And they're friends of Rory's, but they were all sitting around and John came in to say hi. And it was like, hey, Daddy, hey, Uncle, tell us about that time back when before, you know, the wheel was invented, you know, and all that shit. I said, you're like the elder statesman now, man. You're chairman emeritus. You know, you're the professor that everyone wants to hear the fireside chat guy. And I think that's important that like there's someone for that group to look up to and to say, like, you can do it, and it can be economically viable.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, hey, we're not rich, and I'm flying Southwest, and there's no plane in a hangar anywhere. But we're
you don't fly Southwest.
But
sorry.
shit. But well, not now. Deals on United. I love it. So, but you know, we're what I think is coming up is that we're going to see that there's a new model that you can look to. If you don't want to, not there's anything wrong with it. I know we keep saying that, but if you want to subscribe to like the, hey, let's make some big powerful wines that score big from the major critics, that's great, and that's a tried and true path for that, right? We all know the formula for that.
Yeah.
But to be able to show these young guys coming into the Valley that there's another model, and that model can maybe be different and maybe feel a bit risky, but there's a path that's been blazed, and I think that's important. And then the estate cab, that Rossi vineyard coming into the fold, and we purchased it in 2007 and finally started making all estate cab, only estate cab in 2012.
Yeah.
And that became that was a big deal for us, for little old Frog Sleep, you know. I mean, I always tell John, he's the classic American success story. He started Frog Sleep in 1981 with $10,000. Now he's in debt, 22 million. So shit's going well. We're almost there. Seriously, D, if we could borrow some money, that'd be great. Maybe you can sell that Panerai, fucking hawk that thing and let me make a couple bank payments. That'd be dope. That'd be great. Holy shit. I'm serious. We're giving away the farm here today, but dude, this has been great.
Well, hey guys, I'm as I mentioned earlier, I'm very excited to be here with my dear friend Jonah Beer. The fortunate pleasure of tasting the 1996 Zinfandel, which, you know, I kind of start the new school world of Napa Valley post 1994.
Yeah,
But the beautiful thing about this 96, it's still in the old school realm, even though it's in my own personal, you know, new school side. Post 1994, the era. Yeah. And of course, a beautiful 2003, both from Frog's Leap. Rutherford dust, baby. Rutherford bench, man.
Man, you can't, there's something about it. As much as, you know, there's just so much bullshit in this world, there is something good about that Rutherford dust, so.
I agree.
Thank you for having me here today.
JB, love you, brother.
Love you,
Thanks
brother.
very much. And shout to John Williams, shout to the Frogger, the Frog Fellows, and everyone, man.
Thanks, brother.
Cheers, brother.
Good seeing you. Salute. Salute.